Good morning. You're welcome to today's lectures in philosophy of religion. So far, before the lockdown, through this first semester and a little part of the second semester, we've been able to establish the meaning of the course and the different aspects of it. Philosophy of religion we've noted is the rational attempt to understand the meaning of religion, phenomena of religion, the different aspects, the value of religion, the purpose of religion, and so on. Generally, philosophy of religion can be broadly divided into three major areas. Number one is the phenomena of religion. Number two is the God question. And number three is the problem of evil. Under the phenomena of religion, we consider the theories of religion. We consider the value of religion, that is religion and human development, the problem of prayer, religious language, religious vocabulary, and many others. Then, the second part, the God question, we discuss the meaning of God, the history of God, the attributes of God, arguments for and against the existence of God. The third part, we discuss the problem of evil. So far, through first semester and part of second semester, we've been able to cover part A, that's the phenomena of religion, and we've been able also to cover substantially the part B, the God question, particularly the problems, the arguments for God's existence. Even though we started briefly into the arguments against God's existence, but we might not have time for it now due to exigencies of time. So today, we get strictly into the third part of philosophy of religion, the problem of evil. The problem of evil is perhaps the greatest issue, the greatest issue that has generated a lot of controversies, a lot of discussions in relation to God's existence. Atheists generally have hinged their disbelief in God, their lack of faith in God, due to the fact that the world we live in, presumably created by a good and powerful God, is stamped with evil. So we go ahead to discuss the arguments, the kinds, the formulations of the problems, and the different responses to the problem of evil. First of all, it is important to understand that the word evil is from the Old English Eufel, or the German Übel, all meaning transgression, going against expectation, not in alliance with what we want. In the world, evil is real. Many things in the world happen against our expectation. We see some people are very poor, some people are very rich, some people are terminally sick. There is war going on in different parts of the world, epidemic, and as we experience now, pandemic, ravaging the world. We read about evil in books. We've read it in the Bible. We've read it in ancient documents, such that no one can deny the reality of evil. The world is stamped with evil. However, philosophers have tried to distinguish some kinds of evil. Hence, they have what is called moral evil, psychological evil, physical evil, natural evil, metaphysical evil, and many others, as many as one would want to distinguish. Moral evil is that evil that proceeds from the actions of moral agents. The consequences of wrong choices made by man. It is a result of the intentions or negligence of moral agents. It is what can be called in religion sin, a conscious decision to do the wrong thing. Lying, murder, cheating, fornication, adultery, and so on can all be categorized as moral evil. That's the evil that results from wrong moral choices. Moral evil is also seen in man's natural inclination to do the wrong thing instead of the good. Man's natural inclination to make wrong choices, and so on and so forth. Why is man naturally weak and not naturally strong? That is the problem of moral evil. Then, secondly, psychological evil. Similar to moral evil, psychological evil is still that human tendency towards the negative, towards the immoral. Man's tendency towards greed, towards injustice. Why is man naturally fearful and not courageous? Why is man born with low self-esteem, guilt feelings? Why are some men with high tendency to do some things like maniacs, like kleptomaniacs, sex maniacs, and so on and so forth? These are psychological evil, the human bent towards the negative, towards evil. Why is it that, as some anthropologists have inferred, that Africans are inferior to the whites? Levi Brohus says that Africans are 2/3 of humanity, and the missing fraction is rationality. Why is it that the black man seems to be inferior, if it is true? Why is it that women tend to be inferior to men? Is it a product of culture or a product of nature? These are psychological evil, issues to be discussed in the nature, in the psychology of man that produces evil. Then the next is physical evil. Physical evil is the evil we see every day: sickness, automobile accidents, building collapse, inferno, flood, epidemics like Ebola, Lassa fever, of course today, coronavirus. Imagine plane crashes, imagine sudden deaths, imagine people born blind, born lame, born with one deformity or the other. Imagine sudden cancer, sudden liver problem, kidney problem, and so on. All these are forms of physical evil. Then the next is natural evil. Natural evil are bad consequences that derive entirely from the operation of impersonal forces, not originating from man. Things like earthquake, things like tsunami, things like catastrophe, things that just happen uncalled for, what some philosophers have called gratuitous evil, evil unmerited, evil unnecessary evil. Then we look at metaphysical evil. Metaphysical evil refers to such things as natural contradictions, unanswered questions. There are questions in the minds of some of us that we think only God can answer. These are metaphysical evil. Imperfections, non-deliberate miscarriage of justice. For instance, in our law courts, sometimes judges make mistakes and find the innocent guilty and declare the guilty innocent. Sometimes not deliberate. Why are there such things? Why wouldn't judges do the right things? Why would they sometimes not deliberately, a mistake, justice is miscarried and the innocent goes to jail and the guilty is set free? These are metaphysical evil. Why man's inhumanity to man? Why sin? Why war? Injustice, political injustice, oppression of the weak by the mighty. Why is the innocent tormented? Why does the righteous suffer? Why is the weak crushed? Why is there that there is no certain sense of justice in the existential framework? All these that I have highlighted are the different forms of evil that agitate the mind of the atheist, that agitate the mind of those who refuse to believe in God. Because for them, they have difficulty reconciling the existence of a good, powerful, loving God with a world ridden with imperfections and evil. Then the problem, as I have already stated, is how to reconcile the existence of a good, powerful, and loving God. How to reconcile these three attributes of God with the excess of evil in the world. The attributes of all good, the attributes of all loving, the attributes of all powerful. How to reconcile these three with the existence of evil in the world. The problem of evil is the problem of reconciling evil in the world with the existence of God. Sometimes when we look at some religious claims, particularly in the scriptures, it appears to be a stark contradiction to our existence. For instance, in Psalm 37 verse 25, it is stated, I have been young, now I am old, I have never seen the righteous begging bread. Yet every day we see the righteous begging bread. We see the good suffering. We see the just not being able to afford his daily living. That is the problem of evil. In numerous other passages, the Bible makes the claim that God cares for the righteous, that the righteous will live long, but we see the righteous dying early. We see the righteous being barren. We see the righteous losing job. We see the righteous suffering. So the problem then is, what is the reconciliation? Where do they meet? Where do they meet? In terms of, how do we now say that these things we hear about God and the experiences we have can meet each other? That is the problem of evil. Christianity, for instance, claims that God created the world and he sustains it. That God knows all things and that God is capable of all feats. But in the face of tsunami, in the face of flood, in the face of, for instance, the pandemic ravaging the world, where is God? If God is powerful, God could have wiped away coronavirus and not allowed the world wallow in pain, wallow in difficulty. It is either God is not powerful and he cannot stop coronavirus, or God is powerful but not all loving, hence he doesn't feel the pain of his creatures in the world. This is the tension in the philosophical problem of evil. The religious man is always talking about how good God is, but the goodness of God is not felt every day. Prayers are said, but God doesn't seem to answer. And so on and so forth. Now, if the universe is created by a good God, how is the reality of evil to be reconciled? From whence comes evil? The problem, according to Paul Paddy in his work, Evil and Probabilistic Argument, is the traditional conception of God for the theist as omniscient, as all-knowing, as all-powerful, all negate the state of things in the world. Again, the problem is that the traditional conception of God as all-powerful, as all-knowing, as all-loving, all negate the state of things in the world. The world does not reflect the work of a good, loving, powerful God. Again, David Hume, the famous critique of religion, reflecting on the matter in his ultra-empirical compositive attitude, maintained that God's existence, the proposition that God exists, is not a legitimate proposition because it is not a matter of fact. Facts of our experience does not show that God exists, according to David Hume, because the world does not seem to be governed by any intelligence. The world seems to be governed by blind forces. The world seems to be on its own. Just as many philosophers, scientists of the later modern period who were deists tend to believe that God created the world and left the world to roll on its own. One paradox inherent in the concept of God is brought forth by the juxtaposition of all of God being all good and the presence of evil. Epicurus stated this when he said, God either wishes to take away evil and is unable, or he is able and unwilling, either of the two. He is neither willing nor able, or he is both willing and able. If he is willing and unable, then he is feeble, which is not in accordance with the character of God. If he is able and unwilling, he is envious, which is malicious. All these are problems that atheists have difficulty reconciling with the existence of God. God is supposed to be the most perfect being, the most righteous being. In his well-known novel, The Plague, Albert Camus makes it clear that the main reason why he does not believe in God is the impossibility in reconciling the existence of an infinitely good and omnipotent God with a stark reality of evil in the world, supposedly created by him. Then, the next is to look at the different formulations. The problem of evil has been formulated in different ways. Number one is what is called the logical problem. Number two is what is called the evidential problem. Number three is what is called God's hiddenness. And number four is the problem of karma and reincarnation. The logical problem of evil is that the two main claims, one, an omnipotent and omnibenevolent God exists. Two, evil exists, are logically incompatible. Again, the logical problem of evil states that these two claims, one must either be false. The two claims are, one, an omnipotent and omnibenevolent God exists. That's the first proposition, the first claim. And 2, evil exists. These two claims logically are incompatible. It is either an omnipotent and omnibenevolent God exists, which is correct, or evil exists. If evil exists, an omnipotent and omnibenevolent God does not exist. The two claims cannot cohere, cannot stand together. That is the logical problem. However, some philosophers have responded to this problem. They have responded in such a way by trying to resolve that, to show the possibility of a good, powerful God coexisting with evil. 1. If God is said to be omnipotent, it means he could create any kind of world. If God is said to be omnipotent, it means he could create any kind of world. Number 2, an omnibenevolent God would prefer a world without evil over a world with evil. Again, God would create the world he prefers. Given these claims 1 and 2 would be logically incompatible. However, it turns out that at least A may not be true. That's the proposition A may not be true. Even as a classical theistic argument, it could be that a world with free agents is more valuable than the world with no free agents. If God is omnipotent, he would create any kind of world he wants. And God in his omnipotence had decided to create a world with free agents. Since God has created a world with free agents will now is now the cause of the kind of world we live in. Furthermore, it could be argued that such free agents cannot be caused or determined to do only what is morally right and good, even by God. If this is so, in order for God to create agents who are capable of moral good, God had to create agents who are capable of moral evil as well. If this is a logical possibility, and it seems to be so, then premise A is not a necessary truth, because God cannot create just any world. To make it simpler, philosophers of religion have tried to resolve the two incompatible statements of an omnipotent, omnibenevolent God cannot coexist with evil. The resolution is this, that if God is omnipotent, then omnipotence implies the power to do anything. And God's power has allowed him to create the kind of world we live in. That grants him omnipotence. If God is limited alone to create a good world, then he's not omnipotent. Since God is omnipotent, all powerful, it means he has power to do anything. And one of the ways he has exercised his power is to create the kind of world we found ourselves. Again, if God is omnipotent, he has decided to create free agents, not robots. Since God has created free agents, then the free agents has created the world we live in today. Again, the second one is the evidential problem. Evidential problem attempts to demonstrate that the existence of evil in the world counts as inductive evidence against the claim that God exists. One form of the evidential argument from evil is based on the assumption, often agreed on by theists and atheists alike, that an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent being would prevent the existence of significant amounts of gratuitous evil. One way of responding to such argument is to attempt to demonstrate that there is, after all, a point to each of the seemingly gratuitous evil. A solid case for even some examples would lower the probability of evidential argument, and we could maintain that normal epistemic limitations restrict knowledge in many other examples. To explain in simpler language, it means some atheists have argued that the preponderance of evidence in the world supposes that God does not exist. However, theistic philosophers have also tried to argue that our epistemic limitations, our myopia, our inability not to know everything, makes it impossible for us to see the good inherent in the so-called evil. For instance, many of us are fully aware of situations when we have thought that a cause of event A would have been better than cause of event B. Just in the end, we discover that although cause of event A seemed painful, yet it was the better cause of event for us. We've had situations when people planned everything they wanted to do, eventually one thing or the other made it impossible, only for them to, and they cried hell out of themselves, only for them to discover the next time that it was actually better that that thing did not happen. That is the way some philosophers have responded to the problem of gratuitous evil, meaning that we are epistemically naive, we are epistemically myopic, that we cannot see the whole picture at the same time. We are limited. We always see a part of the picture each time. And that part of the picture does not represent the whole reality. Another part of the evidential problem has been advanced by a man called Paul Draper. Draper argues that the world as it is, with its distribution of pain and pleasure, is more likely giving what he called hypothesis of indifference. Meaning that, yes, God exists, but God is indifferent. God doesn't care. God doesn't care about what happens in the world. But Peter in Wangan tried to respond to Draper by saying that this argument does not hold because in every possible world which exhibits a high degree of complexity, such as ours, with sentient intelligent beings, the laws of nature are the same or have the same general features as the actual laws. Meaning that, yes, that it may appear that Draper's hypothesis of indifference does not hold because laws of nature are simply operating on their own as God allowed them. Nature, tornado, earthquake, flood, name them, physical evil and different, what's the so-called natural evil, are simply laws of nature working as they have been allowed to work. And more so, they get worse through the actions of man. Hence, God is not to be held responsible. Again, some attempts to solve the problem of evil are general, applying equally to all forms of evil. It is sometimes argued that God is not to be morally accused, so that the problems of evil in the world can be largely traced to human freedom, to man being able to take choices, because God at the beginning did not create robots. God created free agents, and free agents act according to the evolution, and the consequence of the evolution is what is called evil. Then the next, as time would allow, is what is called the problem of hiddenness. Many people are perplexed and see as problematic that if God exists, God does not make his existence sufficiently clear. Because if God had shown himself clear, there would have been no need for philosophy of religion. There would have been no need for theodicy, for natural theology, for all these human efforts to unravel the mystery behind existence. God seems to be too quiet for us. God seems to be aloof. God seems to be not to be concerned with our troubles and misunderstanding. a good proponent of this position is John Schellenberg. Schellenberg argues that the hiddenness of God provides evidence that God does not exist. He used a child-parent analogy. The analogy is that no child would consider his parents loving who doesn't come to his aid when he needs them most. Imagine a child who is hungry and asks the mother for food. Imagine a child who needs one thing or the other and asks the father for it. The child measures the father's love or the mother's love by their ability to respond, to provide his needs. In our world, as Schellenberg contends, God seems to be too hidden. He doesn't seem to respond to our needs when we need him most. Schellenberg offers several arguments to show his position. One version can be sketched this way. If God does exist, then reasonable non-belief would not occur. For surely, a perfectly loving God would desire that people believe in God. And if God desires that people so believe, God would work it out that persons will be in a reasonable position to believe. That's the point. So, for Schellenberg, if God actually exists, he would have made his existence sufficient enough to encourage belief. But his existence has not been sufficient enough, therefore making it difficult for people to believe. And if God has not made his existence sufficient enough, it means for Schellenberg, God does not exist. However, another